Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
All right, well, today we're diving headfirst into some pretty murky waters.
Oh,
Yeah, we're talking about those allegations of misconduct, at the highest levels of the Department of Justice and the FBI.
hmm. During the 2016 election. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. And we've got this congressional resolution here. It's basically packed with concerns. You've got concerns about the Hillary Clinton email probe. You've got potential misuse of FISA,
FISA.
right? The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act,
Right.
and even the origins of that whole Trump-Russia investigation. It's all kind of tied together here.
Yeah, it's interesting because, this document, it's not just a list of complaints, it's really trying to connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
Like suggesting there's a pattern of behavior,
Yeah.
within these agencies and that it actually could have seriously impacted the election.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is big stuff. So let's break it down. Let's start with something that I think everyone remembers, at least vaguely. It was all over the news, the Hillary Clinton email server. What
Yeah.
what was the core issue there, and why was it such a big deal? I mean, it felt like that story was everywhere for months.
Yeah, it was. Well, the controversy really came from the fact that Clinton was using a private email server for official business
Right.
while she was Secretary of State.
Yeah.
And this obviously raises a ton of red flags, mainly around the potential for breaking federal law and State Department protocols,
Yeah.
things about handling classified information, managing government records, that sort of thing.
Right, because those rules, I mean, they're there for a reason. You need to make sure that sensitive information is actually
Yeah,
protected, right? And that there's an actual record of government business for transparency and accountability.
exactly. And this resolution, it alleges that Clinton's team, might have actually gone a step further and actually destroyed emails that were under subpoena,
Hmm.
using software, that wipes data, right? And even physically destroying hardware.
Wow.
So that raises some really serious questions about intent, going beyond just carelessness into
Yeah.
potential obstruction of justice.
Yeah, that's a whole other level.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so then you've got this whole James Comey chapter of the saga. His decision not to recommend charges against Clinton, the timing, the way he actually phrased things, it all felt kind of, I don't know, a bit off,
Yeah.
didn't it?
It definitely fueled the perception that something wasn't quite right.
Hmm.
And the resolution points out, that Comey was apparently ready to exonerate Clinton months before they even interviewed key witnesses.
Really?
Yeah. And there's the fact that he replaced gross negligence with extremely careless, which, gross negligence actually has a legal definition. Extremely careless doesn't. So that definitely added to the skepticism. It kind of makes it seem like he was, downplaying how serious her actions were.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely felt that way. Okay, and then if things weren't already complicated enough, you have that meeting between Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General at the time, and Bill Clinton on an airport tarmac right before Hillary Clinton was cleared.
Oh, yeah.
What are the chances?
That meeting, regardless of what they actually talked about, seriously undermined, the public's trust in the Justice Department
Hmm.
and that they were handling the investigation fairly.
Yeah.
And it really fed into that whole narrative that maybe the Clintons were getting preferential treatment, like they were playing by a different set of rules.
Yeah, I mean, optics matter.
Right.
For
Yeah.
sure. So you've got this perfect storm of controversy swirling around this whole email investigation, the deleted emails, Comey's decisions, that Lynch-Clinton meeting,
Yeah.
it creates this atmosphere of distrust, and that ultimately would play a major role in how people viewed the later Trump-Russia probe, as we'll see. But before we get there, there's another twist in this whole Clinton email saga, the Anthony Weiner laptop.
Oh, right. Right.
It's like that email story just wouldn't die.
Yeah. It was a major turning point. The FBI finding those additional Clinton emails on the laptop of Anthony Weiner,
Right.
who was married to Huma Abedin, a top Clintonite. It was a huge deal.
Uh-huh.
But, the resolution points out there was a pretty controversial delay in actually reopening the investigation.
Yeah, and that raises a pretty big question, right? What took so long? Was this a deliberate attempt to, bury information that could be damaging?
Yeah. The resolution doesn't really give a clear answer, but it definitely makes you wonder. Right. And on top of that, there are also concerns about a potential conflict of interest involving Andrew McCabe.
Oh, yeah, McCabe. He was, what was he, the deputy director of the FBI at the time.
Yeah, the FBI's deputy director.
And his wife, wasn't she running for office?
Yeah, and she got donations from, Clinton allies.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
Not exactly impartial.
No.
The inspector general later confirmed that McCabe should have recused himself, from the Clinton email investigation, just to avoid even the appearance of bias.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, appearances matter too. It all has to be above board. So you've got this complex web of connections and potential biases around the Clinton email investigation. But the resolution also goes into another Clinton-related controversy, the Uranium One deal. Can you remind us what that was all about?
Sure. The Uranium One deal was all about the approval to sell U.S. uranium mines to a Russian company. And this happened while Clinton was Secretary of State. The resolution alleges that some individuals connected to this Russian company actually gave a bunch of money to the Clinton Foundation, which raises concerns about a possible quid pro quo, right? Like you scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Yeah, yeah. And wasn't there also something about Bill Clinton getting a huge payment for a speech in Moscow around the same time?
Yeah. The timing of that speech, along with those contributions to the Clinton Foundation, it really makes you wonder, like, was there a conflict of interest going on? Were the Clintons using their positions for personal gain?
Right.
It's suspicious.
It is. It is suspicious. And to add even more suspicion, the resolution mentions an FBI informant who claimed that he was actually threatened for trying to blow the whistle on the whole thing.
Yeah. This informant said he had information about corruption related to the deal, but that the Justice Department threatened him if he spoke up. If that's true, that's a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
It suggests they were trying to cover up potential wrongdoing.
Wow. So you have all these potential red flags flying around this Uranium One deal. The Clinton Foundation contributions, Bill Clinton's Moscow speech, this threatened informant. It's no wonder that the Senate Judiciary Committee decided to actually launch an investigation.
Yeah.
What were they hoping to find?
Well, they wanted to know if any laws were broken when they approved that Uranium One deal.
Okay.
If there was a quid pro quo involving the Clintons, and if federal agencies knew about the potential for corruption before the deal was finalized.
It's a pretty basic question, right? Was this legitimate or was there something shady going on?
Yeah, exactly. And then, to make things even more murky, the Inspector General's report later revealed that there was a whole separate multi-state investigation into the Clinton Foundation. And it was shut down under pressure from the Obama Justice Department.
Wait, so they were looking into the Clinton Foundation and then all of a sudden the investigation gets shut down. Who made that call?
The IG report pointed to Loretta Lynch, James Comey, and Andrew McCabe as the main people who decided to shut it down. So, of course, this fueled suspicions of a cover-up. Like, what were they trying to hide?
Yeah. So we've got this tangled web of controversies surrounding Hillary Clinton, the email server, the deleted emails, the tarmac meeting, the Uranium One deal, the Clinton Foundation, and then this shutdown investigation. It's a lot to take in.
It is.
And it's just the beginning.
Right. It's important to remember that this is just the tip of the iceberg. This resolution, it goes even deeper, looking at allegations of FISA abuse and the whole beginning of the Trump-Russia investigation.
Okay, so buckle up, everyone, because we're about to go even deeper down this rabbit hole. Stay tuned. Okay, so we've spent the first part of this deep dive looking at the controversies surrounding Hillary Clinton. But this congressional resolution, it doesn't stop there.
Right.
It goes on to allege some potential abuses of power related to surveillance, and specifically with something called FISA.
Right.
What exactly is FISA, and why should we even care about it?
So FISA stands for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and it's basically a law that lets the government spy on people in the U.S.
Okay.
But it's really focused on foreign intelligence and national security threats, right?
Right.
So they created this special court called the FISA court.
Okay.
And that court can issue warrants for surveillance
Okay.
on people they think are involved in, things like espionage or terrorism.
Right. So it's a pretty powerful tool for the government to use in really serious situations. But like any powerful tool, I imagine, it could be misused.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
The process to actually get a FISA warrant.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be very strict, right?
Right.
With lots of checks and balances to make sure that it's not being abused for political reasons.
Right.
Or, used against Americans who aren't really threats to national security.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So how does FISA tie into this congressional resolution and the allegations of misconduct?
So the resolution is saying that the FBI and the Department of Justice, they misused FISA to target Carter Page, who was a former advisor to the Trump campaign.
Right.
They used something called the Steele dossier as like the key piece of evidence to get that FISA warrant on Page.
The Steele dossier, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
It was that, that collection of allegations against Trump, right?
Right.
It wasn't verified, and it was funded by, wait for it, the Democrats.
Yes, the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign.
Wow.
They were the ones who funded the Steele dossier.
Wow.
Which makes you really question how objective it could be, you know?
Yeah.
Like, could this be politically motivated?
Right.
And the resolution is saying that the FBI and the DOJ didn't tell the FISA court about this very important information when they were trying to get that warrant on page.
So they're basically asking the court to okay surveillance on someone who's connected to the other political campaign
Right.
based on information that was funded by the opposing campaign.
Yeah.
And they didn't even mention that little detail to the judge.
Yeah, they left that part out.
That's not just bending the rules. That sounds like breaking them.
Yeah, it definitely raises the question of whether the FISA court would approve that warrant if they knew the whole story, you know. Where did this Steele dossier really come from?
Right.
Like, what was the motivation behind it?
Yeah.
Because the whole point of these procedures is to make sure that surveillance is actually justified.
Right.
And that the court has all the information they need to make the right decision.
And to make it even shadier, we're not just talking about some random opposition research document.
Right.
There were serious doubts about how credible the Steele dossier was from the very beginning.
Yeah, the dossier was full of these wild and unverified allegations.
Right.
And even the FBI, they had concerns about whether it was reliable or not.
Really?
Yeah, and the resolution points out that the FBI knew about some potential biases of Christopher Steele, who's the former British intelligence officer who actually put the dossier together.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The FBI knew the dossier was shaky. They knew it was funded by the opposing political campaign, but they still used it as their main reason for getting a FISA warrant to spy on someone connected to the Trump campaign.
That's what the resolution is alleging.
Wow.
And it goes on to say that the FBI didn't even follow their own internal procedures.
Really?
These are called the Woods procedures.
Woods procedures.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these procedures are designed to make sure that any information used to get a FISA warrant is accurate and reliable.
Oh, okay. So there's like a whole set of rules.
Yep, a whole set of rules for how they're supposed to vet this kind of information.
And the FBI just ignored them.
The resolution is saying that they either ignored them or didn't follow them properly when it came to Carter Page in that FISA application.
Wow. Okay. And this wasn't just a one-time thing.
Right.
Wasn't there also something about Bruce Orr? He was a high-ranking DOJ official. And his wife, she worked for Fusion GPS, which was the firm that actually put together the Steele dossier.
Right.
I mean, what are the chances?
It's crazy, right? So the resolution is alleging that the FBI didn't tell the FISA court that Bruce Orr's wife worked for Fusion GPS.
Wow.
And that Steele was actually talking to the FBI through Orr. So this is even more evidence that they were hiding the connection between the dossier and the Clinton campaign, right?
Yeah.
Right? Were they deliberately trying to keep this information from the court?
Yeah, it sounds like they were trying to make it seem like the Steele dossier was just some random piece of intelligence that just happened to fall into their lap.
Right, like it was totally objective.
Right.
When really it came from the opposing political campaign.
Yeah. And that's not how it works.
No, it goes against the whole idea of fairness and impartiality that the FISA process is supposed to be about.
Right. So we've got these serious allegations of FISA abuse, potential political motivations, a lack of transparency surrounding the surveillance of someone connected to the Trump campaign. How does all this connect to the bigger picture, to the launch of the Trump-Russia investigation?
Well, the resolution says that getting that FISA warrant on Carter Page, that was a crucial step for the FBI to start their bigger investigation into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia.
So they're basically saying that the whole Russia investigation was built on a foundation of potentially bad and politically motivated surveillance.
Yeah, that's what the resolution suggests.
Wow.
It claims that the whole Trump-Russia investigation was started based on information that was questionable, including the Steele dossier, which was not verified, and that there might have been biases within the FBI that influenced the investigation right from the start.
And then there's that whole other layer of controversy, the possibility that the FBI planted an informant in the Trump campaign.
Right. The resolution mentions that an FBI informant might have been put in the Trump campaign, which is a serious thing, right? Like, was the FBI trying to get inside the campaign even before they had any real proof that something was wrong?
Yeah, this is starting to feel like a spy movie.
I know, right?
But weren't there also some really damning text messages between FBI agents Peter Strzok and Lisa Page,
Oh, yeah.
that basically showed they were biased against Trump.
Those text messages were huge. They showed how much they disliked Trump, and they were even talking about doing things to stop him from becoming president.
And these were the people investigating both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
And remember, Strzok and Page, they were key figures in the Clinton email investigation and the early parts of the Trump-Russia investigation.
Right, so the people investigating both candidates were texting each other about how much they didn't like one of them.
Yeah, and these weren't political appointees.
Right.
These were career FBI agents.
So this makes you wonder if their personal opinions actually affected how they handled these really sensitive investigations.
Yeah, it adds to that feeling that maybe things weren't as impartial as they should have been.
Right. And then on top of all that, there was that whole thing with the text messages going missing.
Oh, yeah.
Like they just disappeared.
A technical glitch, they called it.
Right, a technical glitch.
But it felt like maybe someone was trying to hide some evidence.
Yeah, like sweep it under the rug.
Exactly. And then James Comey later admitted that he leaked classified memos to a friend
What?
to try and get a special counsel investigation going.
Wow.
So all of this, the missing text messages, the leaked memos, it just made people trust the FBI even less.
Yeah.
It seemed like they weren't being transparent, like maybe they were trying to cover up mistakes or misconduct.
So we've got potential FISA abuse, questionable intelligence, biased investigators, missing text messages, leaked memos. It's no wonder people were really upset and wanted someone to be held responsible.
Right.
So what happened to the people involved in all of this? Did anything happen to them?
There were definitely consequences,
Okay.
although some people would say they weren't harsh enough.
Okay.
Several high-ranking people of the DOJ and the FBI, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, and Page,
Right.
they were either fired, demoted, or they resigned because of all the pressure.
Okay, but did any of them face criminal charges?
No, none of them were actually charged with any crimes because of all this.
Okay.
And then there was that whole fight between Congress and the DOJ about getting documents related to the investigations.
Right, right.
The DOJ didn't want to cooperate with Congress. They didn't want to hand over the documents.
Right. Which just made people even more suspicious, Like, what are they hiding?
Yeah, it seemed like they were more worried about protecting themselves than actually finding out the truth.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. We've got allegations of misconduct, possible political bias, questionable tactics in the investigation, a lack of transparency, and a lot of unanswered questions. It's enough to make your head spin.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So what's the big takeaway here? What does it all mean?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This congressional resolution, it's not a legal document, but it does make a pretty strong argument that something went wrong.
Right.
Within the FBI and the DOJ during the 2016 election.
It doesn't really matter if you believe the allegations are true or not. It's had a huge impact on whether people trust these institutions.
Right.
And when people stop believing in the organizations that are supposed to uphold the law
Yeah.
and protect our democracy, that's really dangerous.
Right. It's like the foundation of our whole system starts to crumble.
Exactly.
If we can't trust the FBI and the DOJ to be fair and impartial, then how can we trust the results of investigations, prosecutions, or even elections?
That's the problem. It creates this sense of doubt, this uncertainty.
Right.
And it makes it so much harder to deal with challenges in the future.
Right.
Imagine if there was a real national security threat,
Yeah.
but people didn't believe the government or didn't want to cooperate with law enforcement because they felt like they had been tricked before.
Yeah.
That's the kind of damage that can take years to fix, maybe even decades.
So what can we do to rebuild that trust? Is it even possible?
It's going to be tough, but it's really important. It has to start with accountability. There needs to be a thorough and impartial investigation into these allegations.
Yeah.
And anyone who is found to have abused their power or done something wrong needs to be held responsible.
But we've already had multiple investigations, haven't we?
We have.
Including a special counsel investigation into Russian interference in the election?
Yeah.
Isn't that enough?
Those investigations were important,
Yeah.
but they didn't really focus on the inner workings of the FBI and the DOJ.
Okay.
What was going on inside those organizations.
Right.
This resolution is asking for a second special counsel to investigate these specific allegations of misconduct.
Yeah.
And I think that could be a really good step towards figuring out the truth and getting back the public's trust.
A second special counsel, that sounds like it could get really political.
Yeah, there's always a risk of that.
Right.
But remember, the goal here isn't about scoring points for one side or the other.
Right.
It's about making sure that the people who are supposed to be upholding the law
Yeah.
are actually worthy of the public's trust.
Right.
And sometimes that means taking a long, hard look at ourselves and facing some hard truths.
But even if there is a second special counsel,
Right.
and even if they find that things were done wrong,
Yeah.
is that enough to really fix the problem?
It's a good start,
Okay.
but it can't be the only thing.
Okay.
We also need to completely rethink the FISA process,
Right.
make it harder to abuse, and make sure that anyone who's asking for a warrant
Yeah.
is held to the very highest ethical standards.
Right. So we need to make it much harder for something like this to happen again.
Exactly.
But what about the culture within these organizations?
Right.
This resolution kind of paints a picture of a place where personal biases and
Yeah.
political agendas might have actually affected the investigations.
Yeah, how do you change that? That's the question.
How do you change that?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
It takes strong leadership. From the top down, setting a clear example of how to act ethically and professionally.
Right.
But it also means listening to people who speak up,
Okay.
whistleblowers,
Yeah.
and addressing concerns from people within the FBI and the DOJ
Yeah.
without punishing them for speaking up.
Right. So it's about creating a culture where people feel safe to say something if they see something wrong.
Exactly.
Right. And knowing that someone will actually listen to them and investigate what they're saying.
That's exactly right.
Okay. And it's also about making sure that people are held accountable for what they do, no matter how important they are.
Right. It doesn't matter what your rank or position is.
Right.
If you break the rules, there have to be consequences.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the message is that those rules don't really matter.
Right.
And that's not the message we want to send.
It sounds like a huge task,
It is.
but it also feels like a really important one.
It is.
If we want to keep the integrity of our institutions and our democracy.
Yeah.
So what can regular people do? Do we just sit back and hope the government will fix itself?
That's where being informed and getting involved is so important.
Okay.
We need to stay up to date on these issues,
Okay.
ask hard questions,
Uh-huh.
demand transparency,
Right.
and hold our elected officials accountable.
Yeah.
We can't just assume someone else will take care of it.
Right.
The future of our democracy depends on citizens being engaged and informed.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
We can't just be passive.
Right.
We have a responsibility to speak up, to demand better, and to work together to create a system that is truly just
Yeah.
and accountable.
I totally agree. One final thought I want to leave you with.
Okay.
What if these allegations are true?
Yeah.
What if someone really was trying to manipulate the 2016 election?
Mm.
What does that say about how vulnerable our democracy is?
Yeah.
And what can we do as individuals and as a society
Right.
to make our systems stronger and protect them from threats in the future?
That's a question I'll be thinking about for a long time.
Me too.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
It's been a real eye-opener.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
So if you've been listening along, I really encourage you to keep researching,
Yeah.
have thoughtful conversations about these issues,
Mhm.
and never stop questioning those in power. Our democracy depends on it.
It really does.
Okay, so we've spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive, really digging into these allegations of misconduct, potential bias, and just a lack of transparency, really, within the FBI and the Department of Justice during the 2016 election. It's heavy stuff. And I imagine our listeners are out there thinking, okay, what now? What are the long-term consequences of all of this? And can it even be fixed?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It goes way beyond, just partisan politics. The allegations in this resolution, whether you believe them or not, have really damaged the public's trust in these institutions. And that's a problem. Because when people lose faith in the very organizations that are supposed to be upholding the law, protecting our democracy, well, that's a dangerous situation.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
like, you start to see cracks in the foundation of the whole system. If we can't trust the FBI and the DOJ to be impartial, to be fair, then how can we have any confidence in the outcomes of investigations, prosecutions, even elections?
Exactly. It creates this cloud of uncertainty and doubt. And it makes it so much harder to deal with future challenges. Imagine, there's a real national security threat, but people are hesitant to believe the government or to cooperate with law enforcement because they feel like they've been misled before. That's the kind of damage that takes years, if not decades, to repair.
So how do we even begin to rebuild that trust? I mean, is it even
Hmm.
possible at this point?
It's going to be a long and difficult process,
Yeah.
but I think it's absolutely essential. And it has to start with accountability. We need a thorough, and I mean a truly impartial investigation into these allegations. And if people are found to have abused their power or to have acted improperly, they need to be held responsible.
But haven't we already had several investigations, including that whole special counsel investigation into Russian interference? I mean, shouldn't that be enough?
Yeah, those investigations were important, no doubt, but they didn't really focus specifically on what was happening inside the FBI and the DOJ, their internal workings. This congressional resolution is calling for a second special counsel, one that would focus on these specific allegations of misconduct. And I think that could be a really valuable step toward uncovering the truth and starting to restore public confidence.
A second special counsel. I mean, that sounds like it could be a political minefield. Won't that just further divide the country?
There's always that risk. Of course there is. But the goal here shouldn't be about scoring political points or settling scores. It's about making sure that the institutions that we rely on to uphold the law are worthy of our trust. And sometimes that means taking a long, hard look in the mirror and acknowledging some uncomfortable truths.
Right, right. But even if there is a second special counsel, and even if they uncover wrongdoing, is that really enough to fix the problem?
It's a good start, a necessary start, I would say, but it can't be the only solution. We also need to seriously reform the FISA process to strengthen the safeguards against abuse and to make sure that anyone seeking a warrant is held to the absolute highest ethical standards.
So making it a lot harder for something like this to happen again. But what about the culture within these agencies? I mean, the resolution kind of paints this picture of an environment where, personal biases, political agendas might have actually influenced investigations. I mean, how do you change that?
That's the that's the tough one. There's no easy answer.
Hmm.
It requires strong leadership, setting the tone from the top down, making it clear that ethical conduct, professionalism, that's what's expected. But it also means being willing to listen to whistleblowers, to address concerns raised by people within these agencies without fear of retaliation.
So creating a culture where people feel safe to speak up when they see something wrong, knowing that someone will actually listen to them and investigate their concerns thoroughly.
Exactly. And it's about holding people accountable for their actions,
Yeah.
no matter their rank, no matter their position. If someone breaks the rules, there have to be consequences. Otherwise, the message is that those rules don't really matter.
It's a monumental task, but
Mhm.
it also feels like an absolutely crucial one if we want to protect the integrity of our institutions and really of our democracy. So what can ordinary citizens do? Do we just, sit back and hope for the best?
That's where informed engagement comes in. We need to stay informed about these issues, ask tough questions, demand transparency from our leaders, and hold our elected officials accountable. We can't just sit back and assume that someone else will take care of it. The future of our democracy really does depend on an engaged and informed citizenry.
It's it's a powerful message. We can't just be passive observers. We have a responsibility to speak up, to demand better, to work together, to create a system that is truly just, truly accountable.
I couldn't agree more. And here's a final thought to leave you with. If these allegations are true, and there really was a deliberate attempt to manipulate or influence the 2016 election, what does that say about the vulnerability of our democratic systems? And what can we do as individuals and as a society to strengthen those systems, to protect them from future threats? That's a question worth pondering.
That's a question that'll stay with me for a long time. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. And a huge thank you to our expert for helping us understand these complex and important issues. If you've been listening along, please keep researching, keep having thoughtful conversations, and never stop questioning those in power. Our democracy truly depends on it.